Oh, what a great thing to take home with us. You're not going yet. I'm just saying. But just think, let your soul be your pilot. I love that. When your troubles take to mounting, when the map you have leads you to doubt, ever been there? When there's no information and the compass turns to nowhere that you know, let your soul be your pilot. Let your soul guide you, and it will guide you well. I believe that with all my heart. I've experienced it. I forget it. I am, because it's easy to be distracted. But what a beautiful thing. We've been talking already, just in our music and our prayer, about it's in us, in your soul, that part of you that is the purest expression of the infinite and the purest expression of you uniquely. And it guides you intuitively, all kinds of ways. So anyway, during the month of July and celebrating our nation's freedom, my attention always turns to our individual freedom and what it means as we navigate our spiritual path. It is fundamental. It really is the underpinning. I don't think we could experience the rest of it if we didn't know and feel, at least at times, that inner freedom. Dr. Ernest Holmes, the architect of our philosophy, wrote on the very first page of the Science of Mind textbook, the divine plan is one of freedom. In other words, God, by whatever name you want to call it, intended us to be free, expressions of what? Of itself. He went on to say, freedom is the birthright of every living soul. All instinctively feel this, a freedom that the soul craves. He's not saying that we feel that freedom just naturally because I think we get a lot of stuff in the way, but he's saying we naturally crave it. The soul craves it. I love when I feel really free, don't you? I mean, it's just what's not to love about being free in our lives, in our relationships, in our experiences, in whatever we're doing each day. So this month, the theme has been Set Yourself Free. Set yourself free. The first week was about getting our attention from what's behind and what we want to be free from and turning it forward to what we want to be free to be, to do, to have. Free, looking into all the possibilities instead of worrying about what is we feel is keeping us from being free. So it was about free from or free to. The second week was free yourself to make mistakes. Free yourself to make mistakes. That there really are in the perfection of the infinite's creation, that would be you and me, there really are no mistakes. And we looked at a lot of layers of that to say it. Let's just say there are no mistakes, just retakes. So set yourself free. I picked that title because it is incumbent on each one of us to set ourselves free, not someone else to do it. And the thing is, we do let a lot of things get in the way of our feeling free. And some are obvious and some are rather subtle, but behind, and there are a lot of them are, we want someone else to do it. If only this would change, if someone else would change, if someone would do something for us, somehow, then I'd feel free, then I'd be free. But those are never the things that set us free. We must set our own selves free. And the good news about that is, as you heard Bob sing, we have an unfailing inner guidance system that nudges us toward our freedom, our unique expression of freedom as individuals in our spiritual and personal life. Let your soul be your pilot. Simple gauge, you can tell. During the day, I invite you to try this week. Whatever you're doing, the most mundane to the most maybe scary, monumental, exciting, ask yourself, am Am I feeling free? Am I feeling free in this? And if not, then ask, well, let me see. If it's inside of me, how can I change my perspective so that I start to feel free despite what's going on? It's fun to play with that. And it's amazing how quickly, in many situations, you can shift your perspective, your perception, and you're free of whatever, the nagging thoughts, worry, doubts, and fears that you were letting keep you stuck. So, today, to wrap up this series, I'm going to talk about freedom to be whole. Free yourself to be whole. Now, actually, you and I are already whole. And at our soul level, we know that. We are whole. So actually, it would be more accurate to say, set yourself free to let your soul guide you to recognize and fully experience your wholeness. But see, that was too long a title. So it said set yourself to be whole. Set yourself free to be whole. Whole, perfect, and complete. How many times have you heard in our services, our classes, we read, I am whole, perfect, and complete. It's an affirmation. It's a beautiful, true thing. But it gets to be kind of bumper sticker, and when we don't really pay attention to what that means. Whole, perfect, and complete. WPC, whole, perfect, and complete. So let's tease that apart a little bit today, and let's look at that, and let's kind of see where can that serve our spiritual journey, our personal journey, our walking around lives in a way of being more free. Dr. Ernest Holmes again said, we are so one with the whole, and by that he means one with God by whatever name you want to call that. We are so one with it that what is true of it is also true of us. What is true of God, the infinite, the universe, in all of its magnificence, is true of us. And he goes on, and because of that, he says, so let us seek above all else to know wholeness. You can understand why that would be a priority. If that is our truth, then let's really set our mind to discovering that within ourselves, to recognizing that within ourselves. What he's saying is each of us is a microcosm of the macrocosm. The micro, as goes the micro, goes the macro. It's like a hologram. When you cut a hologram of a rose in half, each piece has the whole rose. Doesn't matter how many small pieces you cut it into, you've got the whole rose there, the complete picture in each one. You and I are that. We are a microcosm of the macrocosm of God, of the infinite. That is pretty amazing. We don't often really bathe in that notion, do we? Really recognizing what that means. And we love when we are reminded. We love remembering that and thinking about it, and then just a few minutes later we forget. And we're human, and we're in a human material world. We get preoccupied with pursuing things and people and conditions that we think we need in order to be, WPC. All that stuff we think we need to be whole, perfect, and complete. Our attention drops down into the material realm. And it's no wonder. It's no wonder because our culture, the message is always about, you're missing something, right? You need something. You're nowhere near whole and complete. But I've got the answer. I've got the thing. I've got the person. I've got the program, whatever it is. And there's always this kind of background thrumming noise and sense of we will be complete and perfect when we possess, achieve, or fix, and so on. So I'm saying this is not easy to be, as Ernest Holmes says, be aware of our wholeness. And he recognized that. He said, we often think that what we require is money, friends, and physical healing, and, the list could be quite long. But he said, we are seeking fragments, when the whole is at hand. The universe is a perfect whole, and healing can take place when we are unified with it, when our thinking is unified with it. So again, he says, let us seek wholeness above all else. Well, okay. So I think we all agree. We wouldn't argue with that. But let's talk about it a little bit more. I have 3 things to look at regarding wholeness. And the first is a question. How can we then integrate wholeness, or the realization of our wholeness, with the pursuit of all the things that we do desire? Are these contradictory? Because I'm not going to stand here and say, well, just set aside everything you desire. It's innate in us to be, the carrot is always out there, to be desiring something. So are these contradictory? And the short answer is no, not at all. Desire actually serves a purpose. And Eric Butterworth, you've heard me talk about him many times, a brilliant unity minister, teacher, writer, author. He said, we are whole creatures in potential. We are whole creatures in potential. And the true purpose of desire is to unfold that wholeness to become what we can be. We are whole creatures of potential, in potential, and the true purpose of desire is to unfold that wholeness to become what we can be. And so he continues on, he says, behind every desire is the urge not to have, but to be. Behind every desire, he said, is the urge not to have, but to be. I invite you to think about that as you're going through your week. Go behind whatever it is you're desiring and go to, but what will that make me be? What do I want to be? And how do I think whatever this desire being fulfilled will help me to be that? See, our entire being is hell-bent, or I should say heaven-bent, on revealing our wholeness. That's its whole intention. Our very being is continually intent on revealing our wholeness. Think of it as an inner template that is vibrationally drawing to us the perfection, the wholeness that we are, by means of the fulfillment of our desires. Think of it as that template that's constantly, it's an energy vibe that's drawing to us always things that match it by means of the fulfillment of our desires. So desires don't have to forget about and say, oh, she said I can't desire anything. Not saying that at all. So this inner template of wholeness, think of it as a huge jigsaw puzzle with 1,000 pieces. Anybody who likes to do a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle? Not me, but you can admit it. The world is divided into 2 groups of people, right? Those who do those puzzles and the rest of us who run from the room in a lather. But think of it, when it started out, all those disconnected pieces obviously feel quite overwhelming. And life can seem like that. It can seem sometimes like a giant, overwhelming jigsaw puzzle. Oh, my. However, every jigsaw puzzle started out as a completed picture, didn't it? Started out a complete picture before it was cut into all those pieces. And while in the process of reassembling them into that complete picture can be daunting, whether the puzzle or in real life, every piece that's required is sitting right there on that table in front of you. It's all there. Wholeness. That template. Our physical bodies have a template of wholeness, an inner template. Despite the sniffles and the fevers and the coughs and the pain, those are just the body's way of setting right what has somehow gotten off balance. Those aren't something to fix or resist or fight. Those are just the body trying to return to its wholeness. Now, I gotta say, that's not easy to acknowledge when you're sniffling, coughing, aching, fever, miserable. But nonetheless, it is true. Our bodies are continually intent on revealing our health and wholeness. That's why ancient, proven medical practices focus on realigning and encouraging and supporting the body's natural impulse to return to health. And when you have an issue, I'm not saying don't go to the doctor, but I'm saying also incorporate a thought process that says, I'm going to do everything I can to support my body in knowing what it knows how to do to be whole. And just that shift in mindset feels so much better. It feels healing. It doesn't feel like such a struggle. I've worked with this myself, and I'm sometimes not so good, and sometimes I do better. But I can tell you this, it just feels more whole, more healing to be in that mindset. And very often, when I allow my body to heal itself and do whatever I need to support that, whether it is rest, water, certain type of food, nutrition, other things that might be really, that I know support it, and give it a little time, wow, our bodies really have that intelligence, that template toward wholeness. And I know our current medical practices have been mainly focused on getting rid of, cutting it out, fighting what's wrong. And let me say, there's been many, many powerful, wonderful solutions to our illnesses and diseases that have happened by means of conventional medicine. So I would not discount that at all. But I've also noticed, and maybe you have too, that more of my doctors, for example, are at least taking a sideways look at healing instead of fighting disease, supporting healing instead of fighting disease. There's an awareness. It's starting to recur. As I said, it was the ancients knew this, but now it's starting to come forward again that, maybe at least there can be a partnership. So all of this is speaking to the wholeness again, the intention of our body, mind, and spirit to reveal its wholeness. And that's in our physiology. Let's look at how our psychological, behavioral template. How is that? How is there a template of wholeness in there? Lord, when you see people behaving badly, it's kind of hard to imagine, or even if, God forbid, any of us have behaved badly. It's hard to believe there's a template of wholeness underneath there, but here's what it kind of looks like. Course in Miracles says everything is a call to love or a call to be loved. That is so powerful. As you overlay that on either yourself, other people around you, and start saying, let me think about that. It may be very difficult in some cases to see that. But if you're willing to be open-minded enough and look behind it, you can see we're all either wanting to love, or we're both. We're wanting to love and we're wanting to be loved. And depending on the situation, it's one or the other, or maybe both at the same time. I had a therapist tell me years ago, I forget what I was struggling with. She was a practitioner in our church, a prayer practitioner, but also a therapist, psychotherapist. And she said, every action is rooted in a positive intention. Every action is rooted in a positive intention, which is a version of what A Course in Miracles said, which is saying there is that template of wholeness again behind whatever is showing up on the surface. And if you dig deeply enough behind your actions, your behaviors, or those of others, you may not know. We can't ever know what's going on in another's mind, but we can we can be in a good place. Let me say it that way. We can be in a good place when we assume that somewhere behind all that we can't understand, there is a positive intention. Now, that doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it helps to alleviate that sense of pervasive hopelessness, because everything has that wholeness in as and through it. And we have, through our bumbling and stumbling through the millennia as human beings, kind of gotten a whole lot of stuff in the way of recognizing that. It's hard to see that template of wholeness, whether it is in our physiology, whether it is in someone's behavior, a situation we're facing, because usually we're in the weeds. We're up to our ears, up to our eyes in whatever's going on. And again, it's a material world, and so it's in our analytical mind, in our physical world, and it's like, I can't see. How about this, the forest for the trees? It reminds me of standing too close to a painting. If we had a painting on the wall and you went up and you stood like an inch away from it, you wouldn't know what you couldn't see the painting, could you? You wouldn't know what it was about. It's not until we stand back and get a bigger perspective of the whole thing that we can say, oh, I see. Have you ever had that happen of something in your life where in retrospect, now you get the bigger picture and you say, oh, I see. At the time, I thought it was all wrong. It was all not going to work out, whatever your sense of dead end was. And I see now there was something, maybe not fabulous that we can see. We might not be there yet, but something good came out of it. Something was working out. It's a good practice to step back in whatever way you can do mentally and take something in from the bigger perspective. Think of we've been celebrating the moon landing this last couple of weeks, the 50th anniversary of people landing on the moon and walking on the moon. And the pictures you've seen, I'm sure, of how the Earth looked from out there in space. That's the big picture. Maybe that's a way to look at whatever what's ever in our face, where we feel like it's not whole, it's not complete, it's hopeless. Take that higher view. Actually, Ralph Waldo Emerson said prayer is looking at things from the higher point of view, looking at the facts of life from a higher point of view. All right, the second thing then is wholeness does not mean you're not going to be changing. It does not preclude change. Wholeness, you would almost think it means, okay, I'm done. I mean, it's all here, it's all done. What? Nothing to look forward to. But Holmes said, our individual universe is forever complete and yet forever completing itself. It's like a Zen koan, right? Like one of those, what's the sound of one hand clapping? And so he says, our individual universe is forever complete yet forever completing itself, in order that every experience may teach us to transcend some previous one, in ever-ascending cycles upward bound. So, every experience is teaching us to transcend what came before and spiraling always upward. Just because you're whole doesn't mean you're finished. Thomas Troward, another early New Thought teacher, writer who influenced Ernest Holmes a lot and whom we talk about a lot because he had such a special wisdom, and he talked about that life force, that wholeness that's in us. He said, by its very nature, it's always for expansion and fuller expression. That's what by its very nature, your nature, that wholeness in you is always for expansion and fuller expression. The production of something, he says, beyond what has gone before, something entirely new that proceeds by an orderly sequence of growth. Patience, that's code for patience. And it means that in each moment you are whole, even as you continue to evolve. So it doesn't mean we're not changing at all. But when we up-level our attention in that way to realizing that all those inner nudges of creative ideas and things we want to do and things we want to be toward our greater self-expression, that they're impulses of the wholeness that's already in us, it's being revealed, somehow it doesn't feel like a struggle. It takes the pressure off. It isn't like, I have an idea and I want to have it happen, and I got to make it all happen. I must do it. I thought of it, and now I've got to bring it into material form. No, it's like that idea, that desire, that solution to a problem, that resourcefulness, that is coming from something in you that already knows. It's already being revealed. And so it's let your soul be your pilot. It takes the pressure off because it is there. It will come forward in the right time, in the right way, as Troward said, an orderly sequence of growth. Third thing then about wholeness. So what about all the things that appear otherwise? Pain, imperfections in ourselves, in others, even dire conditions, and there are lots of them. What about all those things that do not look WPC, whole, perfect, and complete? All right, if I had a $100 bill here, pretend I have a $100 bill. That would buy $100 worth of something, maybe a bunch of bananas and an apple at the grocery store. So I wrinkle it all up, I step on it, I stomp on it, I walk all over it, and then I pick it up and I say, okay, anybody want this $100 bill? Is it now worthless now, right? Because I wrinkled it up and stepped on it? No, it's not. It's got the same value. The same value. That's that wholeness. We have it within us, regardless of what might be appearing on the outside. There was an article in Science of Mind magazine last year, I believe, and the author was a minister, and the minister said what I have experienced, and probably you have too. He said, some of the people I have come through my years of ministry to know as the most whole also were those who appeared to be the most unfortunate and disadvantaged among us, particularly those dealing with physical maladies or contending with a life-threatening disease. Somehow they understood that their wholeness came from a deep remembrance of who they are, that behind disease, behind dysfunction, dwells a spiritual wholeness. I have had the gift of knowing, observing, witnessing people who have really embodied that. Because we're not meant to be perfect. We're meant to be whole. Difference. There's a difference. There also was a story in that magazine about two singers, a singing duo, Karen Karsh and Park Peters, very successful, and they were totally blind, and they had been friends since childhood, and they'd done musical collaboration for decades. And in the article, it said they were accomplished musicians who see, despite being blind, see the world in extraordinary ways, despite personal hardships. Of course, they're resourceful, resilient, and obviously very talented in letting it shine. And the interesting thing is they both see their blindness as a unique gift. Karen Karsh said this, I have a window into the world that not everyone has. That's her wholeness. One of the ways our wholeness shows up is kind of a law of compensation that exists in the universe. When we may have a loss in one way, she lost her vision, we have an enhanced ability, capability, something in another way. So for her, she could see the world in a way that we can't. And her partner, Park, said, I'm happy just exactly as I am. Even if I were able to be me, I wouldn't, even if it were available to me, I would not want corrective surgery. Now that's saying a lot. And Karen said, I had to first make friends with what I was dealing with instead of resisting it. And they say that their lifetime, long-time application of these principles that we've been talking about today is what grounds them in this assurance that there's a bigger picture. There's a bigger picture that embraces and engages us all. Park wrote a song that has a lyric that sums it up and says, we live in the shadow of what we might find because we are what makes us blind. So there is that wholeness that's there. We just get in the way. I love what Archbishop Desmond Tutu said. A life of wholeness does not depend on what happens or what we experience. It depends on how we experience our lives. Again, looking at things from the whole picture. A life of wholeness does not depend on what we experience. Take a breath, because sometimes we're experiencing a lot. But he says wholeness depends on how we experience our lives. So let me wrap it up with this. Set yourself free to enjoy the whole enchilada. I know, make you hungry for enchiladas, right? Dennis Merritt Jones, who has spoken here a few times, said he raised this story about how he went to a Mexican restaurant on enchilada night, and the menu featured all kinds of enchiladas, but the one he wanted was called the whole enchilada. And it had everything in it, as the menu said, but the kitchen sink. So when the server asked for his order, he said, well, I'd like the whole enchilada, please, but could I get it without the cilantro and the red chili peppers? And he said, I don't like those. And she said, well, sure, you can get it that way, honey, but then you won't be getting the whole enchilada, will you? So his point was that too often, rather than embracing the whole enchilada, what is, we rail and we push against whatever we don't like, and of course, that gives it more power over us. What we resist persists. So wholeness isn't about pushing against anything or pushing through anything. It's about being willing to hit the pause button and just be with that something. Hit the pause button and just be with that something. This is about loving what is, loving what's in front of us in the moment. Well, you don't have to like it. And maybe you could start with just accepting it. Accept what is instead of fighting it. And this includes how we see ourselves. About seeing ourselves through non-judgmental eyes. And I don't know about you, but I have a whole list of ways that I can, say, you aren't this, you aren't that, you didn't do that, you should have done, But instead, just accepting and loving the totality of who we are, as he says in his article, warts and wrinkles and all, the whole enchilada. Always remembering, and this is what helps so much, there is more than meets the eye. No matter what's going on, and that is the bigger picture. There's more than meets the eye, and that is wholeness. So, to wrap up this month's theme of Set Yourself Free, let me remind you again, your soul knows how it feels to be free. And so Bob's going to sing a song he wrote with that title, and some of the words are, there's a voice rising up from my soul reminding me of what I've already known. My soul has eyes to see beyond the things that seem to be. And I can't go wrong with it guiding me, because my soul knows how it feels to be free. Namaste.